In the previous video lesson, we looked at the software development lifecycle and how we could use pseudocode or flowcharts to specify an algorithm to solve a problem. And one of the problems we looked at was creating an application that would take a number from the user, an integer such as 30, and then provide the prime factors for that number. So it'd be 30 equals 1 times 2 times 3 times 5. And if the number is prime, such as 19 or 23, it would also tell us it's a prime number and display that number is equal to 1 times itself. So I want to walk you through in this video the workflow we'll use in Python with the idle editor, how we'll create a Python file and test it and go back and debug it and test it again. So we're going to create the application that does this very thing. I have Python installed on my Windows 10 computer. I'm going to go to the Start menu, and in the application list I'm going to scroll down to P for Python. I have several versions installed here. I'm going to open up the Python 3.6, and what I want is the idle editor. So I have idle Python 3.6, 64-bit. I can either just click it here and open it, but if you're going to use this a lot, I would probably drag it over to the desktop, and then you can simply double click it on the desktop and launch the editor. And of course you could also right click on it in the Start menu and then add it or pin it to your Start taskbar at the bottom. That's what I've done. I've got the idle editor down here at the bottom, and I can simply click on it to launch the editor. So I've opened the idle editor, and in the editor we have a prompt here. So I can type in a command here, or a statement, a Python statement. I'm going to say print, and we'll do the popular hello world. I'm going to do a slight differentiation on that, and that is going to be hello Python students. And when I press the enter key, it actually executes that statement. And that's one way we can work with Python. It's a great little thing just to test if you want to see whether syntax of a particular statement works or not. You can do it that way. But what we're primarily going to do is we're going to create files. And we're going to create files, Python files, that contain our code. They will have an extension of .py for Python. So I'm going to go to File and choose New File. And here then is my new file. So I can write several statements of code here, maybe even hundreds or thousands, and be able to save it, and then I can execute that file every time I want to use it. Back here in the editor, once we close the editor, any code we write here is gone. So we'll get in the habit of using files. I'm going to start with a comment, and the comments are statements that the editor ignores. You can type anything in a comment. So I'm just going to type workflow demo here, and my problem is going to be prime factors. And anything after that hashtag is ignored by the compiler. I'll do another one here. So I do the hashtag, and I'll put developed as a demo in CIS 156 at SMCC. So oftentimes I'll put comments at the beginning of the file as maybe who my client was, what this project is, things like that. Again, you can type anything there you want. We're going to get in the habit when we create an application in this course. I'd like you to print the name of the assignment. And so I'm going to use a print statement, and then in parentheses and in quotes, this is going to be assignment 0. And we'll say workflow demo. I'm going to do another print statement, and that is I'd like you to put that you were the developer of this project. So I'm going to say developed by, I'll put my name, Professor Hustedde, for CIS 156 at SMCC. I'm also going to put, after that, let's do, since this is our spring semester, spring 2020. So put your semester, and I'm going to close that with a parenthesis. I'm going to do a /n this time. That's a new line character. That'll give me a blank line. I'm going to provide some instructions to the user on what this program does and maybe how they should use it. So I'll start with this Python program will determine, and I'm going to, through the chance to watch me type all this, let me zoom ahead in the video here. So I want to make sure I close my print statement with a parenthesis and go to the next line. So what I typed in here was a \n. This Python program will determine and print the prime factors. I did another \n, which is a new line, so the next part of the print statement will go to the next line, of an integer provided by the user if the number provided is divisible. Again, another new line character. And I also have a \ here at the end of these lines, which simply says this is continued on the next line. Only by 1 in itself, it will be marked as a prime number. And then I do another \n. So that's going to be our instructions to the user. And now we're ready to start writing our code. I'm going to come down to another blank line. Just to make it a little more readable, I sometimes put some white space in here. We're going to start with a variable of num equals 100. This creates a variable in memory and assigns a value of 100 to it, and it's a variable so that value can change over time. And then my next statement is a while loop, and we'll talk about loops about week 4 or 5 in this course. But I'm going to say while num is greater than 0 and a colon, and notice that when I press the enter key it indents a little bit. So everything that's part of the loop will be indented. So on this line I have num equals int. This is going to take, this is a method that has a set of parentheses. There's a paren here and a parenthesis here. And then inside that is another method called an input statement, input method. It also has a set of parentheses. So for every left paren we need a right paren. And then here, this is just like our print statement. We're going to print enter a positive integer or 0 to end, colon, space, and then we end that with quotes. And this will print this out as a string, but this is going to wait for the user to enter a value. And the value they enter is what we call a string, so we're going to convert that to an integer value and assign it to our variable num. Num will no longer be 100. But I needed to set a value to num up here so I could use it in this loop, and it needed to be a positive value. Now again, I'm going to go ahead and, through the magic of videos, pause here and add a few more lines of code, and then I'll walk you through what those lines do. Okay, so welcome back. So we can see that all the lines of code that I entered are part of this while loop. And as long as num is greater than 0, this code can continue to execute. So we're getting our input from the user. Then I'm going to check to see, is that number 0? And this exclamation equals is the Python operator for is not equal to. So if num is not equal to 0, then we're going to do something. And I can add comments after a statement just to let somebody know this is what I'm doing here. I'm only going to do something if num is not 0. Now this if is another what we call a structure, and so it indents under the if. If you remember in the previous video we looked at the diamond shapes for we're asking a question. We're basically asking a question here. Is num equal to 0 or not? And if it's not equal to 0, then we're going to do all of this. And then notice we have an else down here. Else, we're going to print the statement goodbye. So if they enter a 0, it's going to come down here and do this else and print goodbye and end the program. But if they entered any of the number, we're going to create another variable called prime factors. We're going to have it equal a string value of the number. So number is an integer, or num is an integer. We're going to take the string and we're going to concatenate to that with a plus sign this little string of equals 1. This is going to be the start of our output string. I have another variable called prime, which I'm setting to equal to true, and this is a Boolean variable. It can be either true or false. I'll have another variable called new num. New num is going to take on the value of num. So I'm going to put num kind of off to the side and reserve it because I want to use it again later, but I'm going to change it as we go through the program. Now what I'm going to do, I have a comment here. I'm going to create a loop that goes from 2 to the value of new num and look at every integer between those. So here's my loop. It's called a for loop. For I in range, and then parentheses 2 comma new num, and a parenthesis and a colon. And then everything in that for loop is also indented. And Python does all this indenting for us. It makes it very readable for us. I'm going to loop as long as new num is evenly divisible by I. So the first time through this loop, I is going to take on a value of 2, and then it would go to 3 and go to 4 and so forth until it hits new num. So while new num divided, actually this is going to be a percent here, while new num percent I, and this percent is a modulus operator. It takes the remainder of a division. So I'm going to divide new num by the value of I. Let's say new num was 5. If I divide new num by 2, the remainder I would get would be 1. 2 goes into 5 twice, and there's a 1 left over. So if, however, that was 0, let's say new num was a 4, and 4 divided by 2 goes in twice, there's a 0 remainder, and that's what we're testing for. While new num mod 1 is equal to 0. I have a double equals here. That's the operator for is equal to. So I'm going to return the remainder of the integer division in this process. If it's 0, if it's evenly divisible, we're going to set prime equal to false. That now means this is no longer a prime number. I'm going to take new num and divide it by I. So we're going to shrink new num down. I'm going to modify my prime factors output string here by adding to it this plus equals is a concatenation operator to what currently is already there. I'm going to add a literal string of a space x space, and then I'll concatenate the string value of the number I. So that's going to add that I value to our output string. Now I have a little comment here. By nature, only prime numbers will be evaluated as factors. And the reason for it, if we went on to say to where I was 4, well, 4 cannot be divisible evenly into new num because 2 would have been. So we'd never have a 4, we'd never have a 6, we'd never have an 8. It's only going to actually do anything here with the prime numbers, but it's still going to process all the numbers through this loop. It's going to go through that loop as many times as it needs to find all the prime factors. Then, if prime is true, after it's gone through all the numbers and it's found all the prime factors, if that's still true, then I know that that prime factor is only divisible by itself. So I want to add a x and the num, the original number that we used. And then I'm going to print that number plus is a prime number. So this is going to be a part of our output. I have a little thing here of n equals single quote, single quote. That just means there won't be a new line returned at the end of that print string. So then I can print the prime factors, whether it's prime or not. I'm going to print my string of prime factors, and that will add my prime factors list after this or instead of this. That's my program. Let's see if it worked. So I'm going to go to the Run menu now. Actually, before we do that, let's save it. I'm going to go to File. I always have to say before we run it. So I'm going to say choose Save As. And I'm going to say CS156 underscore 00 workflow demo underscore, and put my last name here. And you can do a .py or it'll add it for you automatically. I'm going to say save. Actually, I'm going to choose where I want this to go. So I happen to have a folder here for Python, and I'm just going to save it here. Okay, so I've saved my file. Now I'm going to go to the Run menu and choose Run Module. It goes back to the idle editor, and here's our output. Let me move this over a little bit so we can maybe see both of these. So we have this print statement, Assignment 0 Workflow Demo, as we see here, developed by Professor Hustedde for CS156 at SMCC, Spring 2020. That's outputted here. And then I have my instructions outputted as 3 individual lines because of those new line characters. And then we start our code. We don't see this happen, but in memory it's created the num variable, added or put 100 into it. It's verified that 100 is greater than 0. So now it's going to ask for this positive integer input. That's what we get here. Enter a positive integer or 0 to end. So I'm going to type in an 8. And I'm going to press the enter key, and it tells me 8 is equal to 1 times 2 times 2. It's actually gone through all of this code. Here's where it printed that statement, prime factors, and now it's come back up because while is still greater than, or num is still greater than 0, it's going to come back to the top of the while loop and let me enter another number. So let's take 38. 38 is 1 times 2 times 19. 484 is equal to 1 times 2 times 11 times 11. Let's put in a prime number. Let's try 23. And it tells me that 23 is a prime number, and then says 23 is equal to 1 times 23. So what happened here was when I went through these calculations, it never found a prime factor. Prime remained, our value of prime remained true, and so it added the x times 23 here, printed out the string that 23 is a prime number, and then printed those prime factors, which was this. Let's do 56. So 56 is 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 7, or 8 times 7. Now if I put in a 0, the program ends and I'm told goodbye. So the program works great. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes we make a mistake. Let's say I forgot that line. I'm going to take this line, I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to save my program and run again. And so now I'm going to enter the same number we had before, which is 8. And I'm told 8 is a prime number. 8 equals 1 times 2 times 2 times 8. So my program is actually, it's working, it runs, there's no errors, it doesn't crash, but it's not giving me the correct result because 8 is not a prime number. And so I have to go back and figure out what happened there. So I'm just going to come back to my program and choose Edit, Undo, and I get my statement back. It undoes the last thing I did, which was to delete that line. Let's make another little mistake here. Let's say that instead of I mistake and put a 1 there. So new num equals new num divided by 1. New num's never going to get a new value. We're never going to recalculate. So let me save this and run. So again, I'm going to put in the number 8, and nothing happens. It's actually gone into kind of an endless loop here. It's in this endless loop, and it's just kind of crashed now and stuck. So what I may need to do is, in this case, a Control-Alt-Delete and end my program. So I'm going to close Python and open it back up. Sometimes we'll have a syntax error. So again, I'm going to save this. I'm going to try to run this again. So what I did is I took off the quote here out of the input statement. Easy to forget that quote. I'm going to run the module. And now I'm getting a syntax error. End of line while scanning string literal. Couldn't find the end of the line because there wasn't a quote to end the line. So I'm going to put that back in. I'm going to do a similar thing here, and that is I'm going to get rid of this one parenthesis. And let's run. I'm going to save it. And now I get just simply an invalid syntax. Now it's going to highlight where the problem is. And the problem here is in this colon. But actually, this line is fine. So sometimes when you find a syntactical error, it may not be the line that it's finding because it's trying to combine this line with the one above. It may be the line above. Just something to be aware of. So I'm a seasoned Python programmer. I recognize my error. I need to put that parenthesis back in. Okay, so I've restored my code to what I originally had. And just testing it again to make sure everything's working. We're typing 8. Works fine. 469. 1 times 7 times 67. If I do a prime number such as 17 and a 0 to end. So just a little bit of a brief look at how you fix problems, how you will notice problems. The more you code, the better you're going to get at finding your problems. And sometimes it may just be a very simple problem that you might have to look at for an hour to figure out what's going on. But that's part of the process of being a programmer. So this is the code. What I'm going to have you do is you can pause this video, and I'd like you to go through and open up Python and create this file with this code, and then put your name in here under the developed by, and save it as CIS156 underscore 00 underscore workflow demo underscore and then your last name .py. Then you're going to take that file. Once you have it working, make sure you test it, make sure it's all working fine. So make sure you're testing a positive number that has prime factors. Make sure you test some prime numbers and a 0 to end. Once you get it all working, you are going to take that py file and submit it to Canvas in the assignments area for assignment 0. And you'll see a submit or an upload button in that assignment. So this first assignment, I give you all the code. It's just a matter of walking through the workflow, making sure everything's working as far as Python, and you'll get a feel for how you enter a program.